Hello there, I'm Anna Amelia and I'm from North East Animal Rights. Welcome to another one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews, and we're delighted to welcome along Juliet Gellatley, who is the founder of Viva. So welcome, Juliet, and thank you for agreeing to do this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Nice to see you again.
Likewise. So for those viewers and listeners who don't know about Viva's work, could you please tell us a little bit about Viva and what you do and how you feel as you're now approaching you're in your 30th year?
Well, I set up Viva almost 30 years ago with animals at my heart. I'd seen factory farming for myself and I really wanted to do something about it and make Viva an organisation that focused on actual investigations, so we were able to show the truth to the public and devise campaigns, imaginative campaigns around those investigations. As Viva's grown, we're sort of 4 sections now. Obviously, the animals is at our heart still, but we also campaign a lot on the environmental issues. So that's the damage done by consuming animals to our world, on health as well, which is the damage done to us by consuming animals, and lifestyle, which is a big section of Viva now, which is helping people. So that has things like the Vegan Recipe Club, and we're about to launch very soon, actually, our second cookbook, which is really beautiful and accessible and easy food.
Thanks for that. I mean, basically, you've covered all angles, haven't you? That's what you've done.
Yeah.
Because we have people kind of like excuse and they can't do for this reason, they can't do for that reason. But actually, the health part of it, the environment part of it, it's kind of like creating those hooks to get people in, and then they stay vegan for the animals, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of our group, Philippa, she runs a vegan recipe club stall at our festival, and we always have Viva at our festivals as well, because we see, we really like your work and what you do. Now, some of us saw, well, all of us saw you at the ones from our group who saw you at Vegan Camp Out. We all went along to your talks, and we heard you talk passionately about the mountain gorillas, and we love seeing all the photographs and hearing you talk about them. But this is a bit of a departure from what we would see as the usual Viva campaigns. So how did that come about, and why is this project so important to you?
Yeah, I think probably people in Britain may be to some degree aware that Viva's in Poland, which I set up in 2002. So we have set a precedent by being in another country, and it's been really successful. And there's a big animal sanctuary over there as well now. And I went to Uganda at the start of last year and was actually blown away by those iconic species that are still there in such a small country. It's only about the size of England, but it has very varying landscapes, and it's astonishingly beautiful and very resource rich, but of course very poor. And I was there for quite some time. When I say some time, I mean about a month, not like a year, but I was talking a lot to people about veganism, and I just started to chew on the idea of actually setting something up as kind of the start of Viva Africa, really, but starting in Uganda, because there are huge advantages to Viva being in Uganda in that it has those species to save. They're still there. But also English is a main language, which makes it obviously very easy to communicate from Britain. So it kind of just all went from there. I started to get in touch with people that I'd met over there, and now we're at the point where we have actually started some of the work. So there's a small school called Atlas School, which is a very small, very poor rural area where it's vegan out of a philosophy for protecting life. And so we've decided to collaborate with that school, and boy, does it need it. It really is poverty stricken in a sense we don't really understand in the UK. And so we're really helping that school. We've already started that work. So, things that you wouldn't understand here, people are trying a land grab because the school is built on certain land, but they hadn't got the money for fencing, and literally tried to poison the children so that they could do the land grab. So it's kind of things that it's hard to get your head around here. So we've just funded building the fencing, so that can't happen again. Next, we're funding building toilets, because you have to have proper toilets so that you can get the government backing. And in the lessons, we're providing resource materials for those children to learn about respect for life. So those children, right from a young age, will learn about respecting all life, each other, yes, of course, but animal life, farmed animals, wildlife, and to try and imbue a sense of pride for their own nation, because it is an incredible country. And how precious that is, and to empower people. So that's one of the first projects, and the second one is very similar. but it's based in an orphanage, which I saw myself. There's some very bad orphanages in Uganda, but there are some really good ones, and we're supporting one of the good ones near Kampala, which is the capital. The other project that we're about to launch is called Kind Heart, which is really exciting, and that's working with secondary schools through Kampala, the capital. Again, actually bringing veganism into the classroom and setting up sort of competitions, you know, for the children that show the kindest heart and the reasoning for that. And then the other one, of course, you touched upon is the gorillas. So we're doing a feasibility study right now, literally right now, in Buwindi, Impenetrable Park, which is where the gorillas live. Now, the gorillas, there's only just over 1,000 on the entire, mountain gorillas, there's only 1,000 on the entire planet, just over. And when you think about that and you absorb it, it's just appalling. They live in the most beautiful, beautiful forests, and about half of them are in Uganda. So we're doing a feasibility study about working with the communities to bring in sustainable vegan farming, and to, again, it's about empowering communities, actually making them proud of being the area where the gorillas live. And also going forward, we want to empower in terms of enabling people to set up very small scale businesses and providing markets for them. So yeah, it's very, very different from UK work, but very rewarding and very needed.
Yeah, it sounds just absolutely incredible, and I just don't know how you find time to sleep with all that going on. It's just so much. So do you have you actually got a Viva kind of like office over there now, or is it just kind of at the moment? This is so you have it.
Yeah, so that's what we've been working on this year. We now have offices, and we have 2 members of staff, Dash, who is running like the campaigns and the marketing, and Sam, who's just about doing everything else at the moment. And we've also now got a crew of volunteers who are trained to do the school talks. So yeah, it's getting really exciting.
I suppose it proves as well that, you know, like poverty isn't an excuse to being kinder, is it? It's kind of, if you're saying that there's a school already there in a really, really deprived area, and they're still able to be kind and be proud of the area, and be kind to the animals. Because I think that sometimes in the UK we're quite easy, we're very, very quick with the excuses of why we can't do things rather than why we should do things. Yes. And I think that's what you're saying. You're showing quite easily that. I mean, obviously it's a huge task, but the intention, the will is there, isn't it?
Absolutely. There are complex issues around this, but as a very broad, sweet comment, Uganda has got the kind of luxurious position of being incredibly fertile and able to grow almost anything, and a lot of it, it's the equator runs through it, and it gets plentiful rain in some parts, and not so much in others, because it's got the dry savannas as well. It's incredibly varied for such a small country. But there are areas where basically people are almost vegan by default. And I don't mean that in a bad way, that they're deprived in any kind of way by default. What I mean is they're actually eating an incredibly varied diet based on all the things that we would recommend. It's just they wouldn't label themselves as anything. And of course, we've got this problem, sadly, of people aspiring to meat, because it's something that the West have tried to imbue in all of us, that it's something that we should, hanker after, and it's something that only people with more money can afford. Therefore, people want what what they haven't got, even though, of course, they're healthier. It's a very familiar story, isn't it? Yeah. So there's a big job to do there in terms of changing attitude, and I thought that was one of the reasons it was a good time to go in now, because there's a German company trying to set up factory farming of pigs, and there is almost no factory farming at all in Uganda. So we kind of want to start putting the stoppers on before it even begins, which is a huge task in itself. There's a lot of issues, and it's really interesting and it's really challenging, but we can but try.
Well, if anyone can do it, you can do it. So how are the authorities and kind of like local organizations kind of like taken to, essentially a UK organization coming over and sort of doing things which they can't do or won't do or don't have the time to do?
It's a very interesting question, and there is not a simple, quick answer for you, because some authorities take umbrage if they think, if you have to be so careful how you word things, because you cannot word it as being a criticism of what they're already doing. You have to work hand in hand and collaborate and be a diplomat. But having said that, there are a lot of UK organisations already in Uganda that they, there's very big organisations, obviously nothing to do with what we're working on, or they cross over. So it's not an unusual concept for that to happen at all. There are quite a few NGOs, and we're applying for NGO status right now. So they're used to that, and from people on the ground, obviously they value help. I found working with Ugandans so far really quite delightful on the whole. It's one of those things that you talk about, isn't it, about losing senses of community in countries that become more industrialized and more so-called sophisticated. And it's definitely true. You go there when you're not used to living in a community, it's really different. And there's a lot of that goes on in Uganda. Genuine communities still exist, so there's lots of richness in different ways that we don't have. It's a very interesting country.
So I suppose really we can learn a lot from them as well, can't we? I mean, kind of all the things that we've lost, particularly like you're saying that they are almost by default vegan, they're following the vegan sort of like lifestyle because it's just better for them, and we are kind of almost corrupting them.
It's already started. So chronic disease from Western food, as I call it, junk food, is already well in there in places like the bigger capital cities, the bigger places, and the impact of that is really hitting home. The trouble is in Uganda, of course, apart from the fact that of all the damage that's going to do if it continues to expand to animals, to their health, to the environment, is people don't have healthcare. In the NHS, in the UK, we're kind of have this safety net. Well, it seems like it's quite a fragile safety net more and more, but it is there. In Uganda, you're paying for your health, and people are very poor. How can you afford to do that? So that's another message that we can go in. Like you said, it's a tool to make people open their eyes and think, actually, I can actually prevent chronic disease by living this way. It actually makes a lot of sense. So that is another message we will be going in on.
Yeah. So you mentioned when we heard you at VCO, we saw some of the photographs of you with the gorillas. So can you tell us a bit more about your interactions with them? You've sent through a picture of you with some poaching. Do you call them the rangers or?
Yeah, the rangers.
Rangers,
You saw they had guns. That was so I met different rangers in different parts of Uganda. The first ones I met were actually to protect the rhinos, and the rhinos were actually made extinct in Uganda in the 80s when there was political turmoil. And they've set up a park which is huge. It's not a zoo or a safari park, it's actually huge. And the cost it must have taken to put electric fencing around something that enormous, it must eye-watering, but they've done it, and those rhinos are protected 24/7, which like I say, it's a very sad statement on the human race that you have to do that, to protect them from being killed for their horn, for God's sake. With the mountain gorillas, they're in a different area called Bwindi Impenetrable Forest, and that's a national park as well, which is protected again. So, but to protect them again, there's still illegal poaching, which has almost been stamped out with the gorillas, actually. But to stamp it out, the amount of resources it takes in terms of people looking after those animals, basically. So when I went to see them, you've got trackers and you've got rangers. The trackers are brilliant, talented people. It takes years. Sorry, I told you.
We see a little tail wagging in the background.
It's no good. I can't just talk to you. I've got to be giving you far too much attention. So the trackers, it takes years to become a good tracker. They will track where the gorillas are each day and check that they're okay. And the rangers, of course, are carrying guns. I was really fortunate to, I paid the extra to go and see those gorillas on my own. So I was literally the only tourist, and I paid extra to have 4 hours with them, because most tourists would have one. Because I like just sitting with wildlife quietly, and I will just absorb and imbibe the environment, and I like watching their behavior. I always have my degree in zoology, and it's just something I like to do. But I've never been anywhere. I have been to various rainforests. I've never been to anywhere like that. if you haven't sort of experienced it, you know, like in a British forest, you'd be walking along pretty much a set pathway, and even if you come off that pathway, you know, it's relatively easy to walk through, and you can feel the ground beneath your feet. That sounds a bit odd, but what I mean is, in the impenetrable forest, you're on litter like this deep, so the ground is somewhere down there underneath this massive leaf litter. And you kind of trying to get through to the gorillas, which, you know, there is no set pathway by this point, so it's something I haven't quite experienced. It was really, really interesting. And then just was walking, and then suddenly she's there, the mother gorilla with her 4-year-old son, about 10 feet in front of me, and I just kind of stopped, you know, and she just looked at me, and I looked at her, and I sort of was judging, was I bothering her? And she just went on to play with her son, so I just crouched very quietly down and just stayed and just watched her behavior with her son, and their affection and their humor. Actually, they've definitely got, you know, sense of cheek and humor, just like we have. And then I kind of moved around, and the forest dropped down into this huge valley, because of course it's mountainous, impenetrable. You know, mountain gorillas kind of gives it away, doesn't it? Mountain gorillas. I didn't kind of absorb how hard it would be to kind of walk to them, but you know, got there, and you just, for me anyway, it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen on the entire planet. This lush greenery, and in the distance you obviously got the trees at different points along this valley. I was watching the gorillas climb these trees, and they're ever so careful and cautious. And I had seen chimpanzees for a shorter time, and that's the first time I've seen chimpanzees as well. And they're just the complete opposite. They're absolute maniacs, you know, and real daredevils. You see the young ones on these trees that are so huge and making these leaps, and you're like, you know, your heart's in your, you know, your mouth, and you're like, or your stomach's in your mouth, whatever the saying is, and you're like, oh my God, don't do that. You know, they're real risk takers. Whereas the gorillas are, you know, slow and cautious, and you can see them making their decisions, and but they climb really, really high, and you can see someone like just, I guess, up there just to see the beauty of the place, and maybe as a lookout as well for their troop. And I told the story of the you know, the silverback, because the silverbacks actually are by far the most cautious with human beings. You know, the females and obviously the young are much more at ease with your presence. But I was sat near a silverback. He was completely covered by the bushes that he was in, but I was listening to him call all the time, and I was listening what that sounded like, and I found that really magical. And he was the deposed silverback. He was the deposed father, and it was son that was now leading that group, but he'd been allowed to stay in that troop. And I was, you know, had half an hour left, and they said, come with me. So I'm walking. I thought, what are they going to do? And they just pushed me in front of them. There was the actual alpha silverback, and I'm talking, these are big animals. They're like 50 stone, 6 feet tall. You know, they're strong. And he just leapt at me, this alpha silverback, and you know, I jumped out of my skin, as you can imagine you would, because I thought, oh well, this could be the end. It's a strange way to go. That's it. And then he just suddenly stopped as fast as he started. You know, he bore his teeth at me, and he, you know, made it very clear that he was the boss. And I just sort of looked at him, and I just went, I knew that already. Okay. Really, nothing. And he just sat down and pulled up these grasses and just put them through his mouth like that to get the seeds off. And that was something that really brought you home. You know, all this thing about vegans and protein, and you're looking at this animal with muscles. This, you know, exactly. You sat there eating the seeds of the grasses. You know.
God, it sounds absolutely incredible. It sounds amazing. I don't want to kind of like dampen the what we're talking about. We've only got a couple of minutes left now, but I just wanted to kind of like mention, ask you a question really. Obviously, we saw the Piers Morgan, you know, the interview, in theory discussing the band advert, but he didn't actually let you get, you know, you got some knockout blows in. So very quickly, was it worth doing?
It was. You know, when you go on Piers Morgan, what you're getting. It's not like I was walking in blind. So I knew he was going to gish gallop me all the way through. And, you know, he just has these diversion tactics to ensure that you don't get really very many serious comments out. And that's his style. However, you get lots and lots of traction from that. And also half of the Muller ad was shown on live national television, which is ironic. And also the Daily Mail, it sat on their site online, you know, this banned video on the biggest media, or one of the biggest media platforms, newspaper platforms in the whole world. So it's led to really good stuff. It was really worthwhile.
Good. Well, we've come to the end of our time together, so thank you very much once again for doing this. Really do appreciate it. So I'm going to sign off now. This is Anna Amelia from North East Animal Rights saying thank you very much to Juliet Gellatley, the founder of Viva, for giving up her time today.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.